Upside wins fantasy football matchups, and these players are set to go absolutely nuclear in week 2. You cannot ignore these matchups. These are the players that are set to help you guys absolutely dominate your league mates this week. We're going to start the video off with Garrett Wilson of the New York Jets, coming off of a monster performance in week 1 against the Pittsburgh Steelers, where he had 22.5 fantasy points, 9 targets, 7 catches, 95 receiving yards, and a touchdown. I was a little worried about Garrett Wilson and the Jets in general in week 1 against what on paper should have been a good Steelers defense, but man, they looked absolutely electric in week 1, and now they're getting this Buffalo Bills defense that got absolutely shredded by the Ravens on Sunday Night Football in week 1. Now, the Jets looked great in week 1, but I don't know if we can compare them to the Ravens quite yet, but still, you look at this run defense for the Jets, you look at this secondary for the Jets, they were essentially non-existent in week 1, and they played very poor against the quarterback position as well. Now, once again, it is Justin Fields, Lamar Jackson. I mean, not quite to say the least, right? But this is a great opportunity in week 2 at home for the Jets. And like I said, Garrett Wilson coming off a monster game. He had a 100% snap rate in week 1. Him and Justin Jefferson, the only wide receivers in week 1 to be on the field for 100% of snaps. And what is crazy here is that, you know, this is one of my speculations all off season long. Like there's nobody else at the receiver position on this team for the Jets. It's Garrett Wilson and nobody else. And that was obviously true in week 1. The volume is going Garrett Wilson's direction no matter what. And the secondary for the Bills is extremely porous right now. It's already banged up early in the season and just playing overall extremely poor. There's no way that Garrett Wilson, who finished as the wide receiver 6 last week, is not going to come out with another monster performance here in week 2. So if you guys own Garrett Wilson, he's more than just a flex play, probably even more than just a wide receiver 2 in week 2 of the season. He's an absolute must start. He's going to go absolutely nuclear once again. And I was absolutely shocked to see Garrett Wilson's line on Underdog only sitting at 59.5 total receiving yards after he absolutely dominated week 1 with 95 total receiving yards, and he gets this amazing matchup against the Bills. I'm headed straight to Underdog to take the over on Garrett Wilson's total receiving yards, and don't forget, all new users who sign up on Underdog using promo code THECATCH, that link is down below, are getting a free NFL Pick Em to use towards NFL Week 2 action. Take that free Pick Em, take Wilson's over on receiving yards. If both of those lines hit, you'll automatically double your cash entry. Underdog has a new promotion for all users who sign up using promo code THECATCH. Once you play through $5 on Underdog, you're going to receive $50 in bonus funds. And you're going to receive a $50 deposit match up to $1,000 once you sign up using promo code THECATCH and deposit on Underdog. So that promo code is down below. Use it if you guys want to take advantage of all of Underdog's exclusive Week 2 offers. Well, in last week's video, we talked about Emeka Egbuka of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and in this week's video, we're going to talk about Emeka Egbuka once again. A week 1 performance against the Atlanta Falcons where he had 23.6 fantasy points, 6 targets, 4 catches, 67 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. And now going into week 2 on the road here once again for the Bucs, but facing the Houston Texans. I absolutely love this matchup for Emeka Egbuka because we saw a slight injury to Derek Stingley at the cornerback position for the Texans in week 1. He's obviously their number 1 corner, but regardless, he's going to be lining up on Mike Evans throughout the course of the game. Like, we already know this. And when we look at what happened in week 1 when it comes to the Texans in terms of their wide receivers, well, Derek Stingley was actually covering Davante Adams for a majority of that week 1 matchup, and Puka Nacua was the man who was left alone, and Puka Nacua had a great week 1, was able to absolutely feast. I'd be maybe more worried if I was a Mike Evans owner, right? Puka Nacua had 23.1 fantasy points in week 1, 11 targets, 10 catches, 130 receiving yards. Davante Adams, a much rougher day overall. It didn't look awful or anything, but Derek Stingley is the corner that you want to avoid when it comes to fantasy football, and I believe he's easily going to be on Mike Evans here in week 2, which is going to leave things open for Emeka Egbuka, and this is going to be another opportunity where we're going to see the Bucs throw the football a lot. I think this game is going to be a little bit more competitive than some people are thinking. The Rams-Texans week 1 was a bit more defensive game, and the Bucs didn't necessarily light it up against the Falcons, but I think ultimately we're going to see points scored in this week 2 matchup, and Emeka Egbuka could easily find the end zone once again. I think he is an absolute must-start flex play for you guys, wide receiver 2, whatever he is. I really think as the season starts to progress here, we're going to view him mainly as a wide receiver 2 in our fantasy rosters, but 23.6 fantasy points in week 1. I think he is a lock for double digits and could absolutely pop off here in week 2. And if you thought I was done talking about Jets players, well, you were wrong, because next up for our first running back, we're talking about Breece Hall of the New York Jets, who had a really solid day against the Steelers in week 1 with 16.5 fantasy points, 107 rushing yards off of 19 rushing attempts, 4 targets, 2 catches, 38 receiving yards. No touchdowns for Breece Hall in week 1, but he finished as the RB7 in PPR in week 1. And you look, Braylon Allen just 6 touches in week 1, so this was still Breece Hall's backfield, and he was able to have that nice of a fantasy day with Justin Fields having 12 rushes himself at the quarterback position. And like I said earlier in the video, this Bills defense is just flat out bad, and it was not that great last year either. This was a matchup that we were trying to exploit when it came to running backs last year, because the run defense for the Bills was not good. And if week 1 was any indication, it's not good again here in the 2025 season. Now, once again, are the Jets the Ravens? Do they have Derrick Henry? No, but Breece Hall, very, very solid day against what, once again, on paper, is a good Steelers defense. And I think at home in week 2, we're going to see another big week out of the Jets, because keep in mind, this Jets defense is also not very good, right? And the Bills are going to be able to put up points. The Jets are going to have to play to that same pace. And I think ultimately we're going to see another big game from the Jets in week 2 and from the Bills in week 2. So yeah, I like just about all the players involved here, but I think Breece Hall is a player who, once again, in terms of draft season, got pushed back a little bit in drafts. He's a player who I'm considering a must start until further notice, that you should have a lot of confidence in terms of being your RB2, the way he was utilized in week 1. But here in week 2, don't ignore the matchup against the Bills. He should be absolutely electric, a lights out play who could absolutely pop off once again here in week 2. Next running back that we're going to talk about is Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars, who had a surprisingly good day, I think you could say, in week 1. I don't know what we were exactly expecting out of the Jaguars backfield in week 1, a very kind of polarizing backfield in terms of draft season, but it was basically all Travis Etienne in week 1, 18.6 fantasy points, 143 yards on the ground, 3 targets, 3 catches, 13 receiving yards. And we look at the split in week 1. I mean, it was all Travis Etienne. Tank Bigsby barely had any involvement, and that was the running back who I think most people on paper had as, the next man up. And he had 5 rushing attempts for 12 rushing yards and his 2.4 yards per carry. But it doesn't even matter, because he's been traded to the Eagles. It's entirely Travis Etienne's backfield. And then, most people looking at Breece Hall as the next possible man up. He did have 3 touches for 11 rushing yards, but Keenan Allen had a target and a catch and 1 rushing attempt as well. So not that far behind Tootin. So I don't really know if this is going to be like an RB by committee with a Bucky Irving, Rachaad White, like some people were expecting, because of head coach Liam Cohen coming from being the offensive coordinator of the Buccaneers last year. This might just be Travis Etienne season. So if you drafted him, hats off to you. And we got to give our hats off to Etienne as well in week 1, who had 8.9 yards per carry. Absolutely insane. Right next to Derrick Henry in terms of week 1 yards per carry. That's how good he was. And he gets a great matchup here in week 2 against the Cincinnati Bengals, coming in 26 against the running back position. And, you think back to week 1, right? The Bengals finishing 26 against the running back position. Who they play in week 1? The Browns. I mean, Dylan Sampson had a great day catching the football, 8 targets, 8 catches. But outside of that, Dylan Sampson had 29 yards on the ground. and Jerome Ford had 8 yards on the ground. Like, it was not a good performance whatsoever by the Browns running back. So maybe that actually might make you a little bit nervous. But the point being is that this is a better backfield with Travis Etienne. He should be able to have a very good day against this Bengals run defense here in week 2. And at worst, we'll get involved in the passing game if maybe this Bengals defense is actually surprising. But right now, they're still ranking very low. So it's a very good matchup for Etienne. Tank Bigsby's out, which only should make you feel way more confident if you own Travis Etienne. He is a must-start player here in week 2. All right, if those players felt like too obvious of choices who are already in your lineup, let's move to 2 bench candidates to wrap up the video. And we're going to start with Keenan Allen of the LA Chargers, a player that I did like a lot going into week 1 as a flex option, a player that I talked about a ton throughout the course of draft season, but who cares? It's week 2. We got to get ready for our week 2 matchups, and Keenan Allen's coming off of a week 1 performance against the Kansas City Chiefs where he had 19.8 fantasy points, 10 targets, 7 catches, 68 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Now, can this type of volume across the board for Keenan Allen, Ladd McConkey, and Quentin Johnston go on forever? I'm not entirely sure. Justin Herbert had 34 passing attempts in week 1, so that's high, but it's absolutely nothing crazy. And I think when we kind of look to the second half of the season last year when Justin Herbert was healthy, we saw 34 or more passing attempts in every game in the fantasy season except for 3. So I don't think it's that unrealistic, but the bigger thing is the Chiefs did shut down the run game in week 1 for the Chargers, and we know that they are going to want to establish the run in a lot of these matchups and get Omari and Hampton going. We will see some of that throughout the course of the season, but once again, this is a great matchup against the Las Vegas Raiders here in week 2, who just gave up a big day to Kayshon Boutte and decent day to Stephon Diggs. Demario Douglas found the end zone. Hunter Henry at the tight end position had a good day. I mean, you got to look at this Chargers offense right now, and once again, even without Rashawn Slater, Joe Alt absolutely dominated at the tackle position, and if they can get this passing game going on a weekly basis with a healthy Justin Herbert, the advantage that Keenan Allen has is that Ladd McConkey is still that guy. He is on the field 100% of the time. And Quentin Johnston is a talented wide receiver who has some flaws, but he is still a player who the defense has to account for. And that's going to leave Keenan Allen, especially at the line of scrimmage with Ladd running the routes he can run and Keenan Allen running the routes he can run. At the line of scrimmage, it does create such mismatches for defenses. And the Raiders do not have the personnel to stand up to this wide receiver room. They just straight up don't. So the Chargers are on the road here, but I absolutely love Keenan Allen as a flex play. Once again, here in week 2, I think he's a very strong start. He's moved up to 71% rostered. That's only a 10% increase around from the last waiver period. He should be rostered in 100% of leagues. Once again, I don't know if this is going to be sustainable forever with these 3 players or these 3 wide receivers. Quentin Johnston has moved up to 70% rostered, but I think that Keenan Allen is the guy here who's going to benefit the most outside of Ladd McConkey. I still think is going to be completely fine and very productive this year, but Keenan Allen, I think, is a player you guys can trust in the flex on a week in, week out basis. But here in week 2, this matchup is far too good to ignore, and he could absolutely explode once again. All right, last player I want to talk about is Cedric Tillman of the Cleveland Browns, who scored 16.2 fantasy points in week 1, had 8 targets, 5 catches, 52 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Here in week 2, he gets the Baltimore Ravens on the road. And one thing I talked a lot about going into week 1 is that this Ravens defense is not as good as you guys think. It's just not. It wasn't good last year in terms of their secondary. They were fine against the run, but they even struggled against the run in week 1. But this team gave up a lot of fantasy points to the wide receiver position in last season, and in week 1 as well, they give up the second most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. And there's no knock against the Bills, but they weren't playing an extremely stout team at the wide receiver position. They were playing Keon Coleman, who may be having a breakout season, Khalil Shakir, who is talented, and Josh Palmer, who's talented, but it's not like they were going up against an absolutely elite wide receiver room or superstar player, right? And they looked like absolute shredded cheese out there. So I absolutely love Cedric Tillman here in week 2. We know that Jerry Jeudy's still going to be on the field, and maybe 2 different viable tight end options, and then Dylan Sampson at the running back position. Like, there are other players here that will take away defensive pressure, but that's why I always kind of look to these like wide receiver twos in these matchups, because they're going to carry a lot of kind of quiet upside. And Cedric Tillman was a player we talked about as a sneaky start going into week 1 as well against the Bengals defense, and I don't think that really changes here in week 2. Joe Flacco threw the football 45 times in week 1, targeted said Tillman 8 times. Jerry Jeudy was targeted 8 times as well. Harold Fannin was targeted 9 times, and Njoku targeted 6 times. So you saw the rookie tight end had the most targets, but said Tillman tied for the second most targets on the team. I don't think that type of volume is going to change in week 2. And I think if anything, the Ravens defense could have success against a poor run game for the Browns, whether Quentin Junkins is ready to play in week 2 or not. But then again, like I said, the Ravens run defense didn't look very good against James Cook and Josh Allen in week 1. Now, Joe Flacco, Quentin Junkins, Dylan Sampson, not quite Josh Allen and James Cook. But the point being, I still really like this matchup for Cedric Tillman. He's a very sneaky player this week, only sitting at 42% rostered, even after the last waiver period. So if he's out there and you need help, he's a strong flex play who could quietly go nuclear here in week 2. That'll do it for today's video. There are 6 players set to go absolutely nuclear here in week 2 of the fantasy season. Do not leave those players on your bench. They're going to help you guys absolutely dominate this week of fantasy football. And by the way, if you guys have any fantasy football questions, drop them in the comments down below. I'll answer every single comment on this video, and I'll help you guys dominate this week of fantasy football. While you guys are down there, it does me a huge favor if you guys go ahead and hit that subscribe button on the way out. All we do here is free fantasy football content, redraft, dynasty, and best ball. If you guys are into that, be sure to subscribe on the way out. And when the videos do pop up on the screen, on the playlist and everything, go check out some of our other videos for week 2 this season to once again help you guys absolutely dominate this week of fantasy football. With that, I'll say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on The Catch.